Welcome to the 2021 Virtual Bootcamp, our second virtual bootcamp at PMA, but the continuity of a lot of learning over the past few years and a lot more intentional and self-directed learning as well. Think back to last year's virtual bootcamp. We took some time to learn about self-directed learning, this concept that we as adults can control our own learning process, that we decide what to learn, how to learn it, and how to decide if we've learned it well enough. We talked about learning like a trip from here to there, and self-directed learning like a trip where we were the drivers and where it was important to plan our trip. So to intentionally set yourself up for self-directed learning. We talked about the different stages of this learning and how to prepare for each. That first you have to set your learning goals and then identify the resources that would help with that learning and then plan your intentional actions to kick it off and think about when and how you'd check in and see where you've gotten and if you're on track for the goals you set and how you'd evaluate your progress and if you wanted to keep going on that route with that learning or take a break or change routes, adjust your goals, and then continuing that trip or starting a new one. Through the TKX quarterly check-ins, through your updated IDAPs, and through various exchanges I've had with many of you, I'm hearing that you are all growing as self-directed learners. And while it's hard, you're really planning your learning trips intentionally, which is great. Now that you've worked so hard to plan your trip, to intentionally set yourself up for self-directed learning, it's time to focus on taking that trip. I've heard from many of you that a main learning challenge you've had in the past year has been around how to integrate learning into the work that you have to do, how to make your trip not a side trip, not a weekend trip, one that needs a chunk of time away from your work, but instead a trip that is continuous and that's integrated into the work you do. So how do you learn better at work, as a part of work, through your work? Let's start by looking at some common frameworks. Some of the key frameworks that explain how to design something, to understand and get better at something, which necessarily imply learning and improving as part of their process, they all have the same basic structure. If we look at the scientific method, first you make an observation, then you ask a question based on that observation, and then you form a hypothesis, and then you make a prediction based on the hypothesis, you test that prediction, and then you iterate using the results to make new hypotheses or predictions. This is familiar, right? We learned this in grade school. If we look at Kolb's experiential learning cycle, something that is very key to the field of learning studies, we start with a concrete experience. This is the experience that serves as the basis for observation. And then we go into observations and reflections about this experience before we make any judgments. Then we form some abstract concepts and generalizations, these theories that explain the experience, and then we test out the implications of the concepts that we put together in new situations. So we apply what we learned in this experience to another situation to solve these problems. They both already look a bit similar, right? Well, let's check out one more. Design thinking. In design thinking, we're asked to first empathize, to really reflect on what is going on, what's the situation, what are people experiencing. And then we define what we want to solve for. We ideate how might we solve for that. We prototype it, putting together a little bit of an option, and then we test out that prototype. They're starting to look very similar, aren't they? Well, that's because they all say the same thing. When you want to learn something and make progress on it, improve on something, you need to plan, and then do, and then reflect, and then repeat this again and again. These frameworks all tell us that doing something alone, just having this experience, just running these tests, that is not enough to learn and improve. You have to be more intentional, and you have to keep going around in this cycle of iteration, this intentional iteration. For many people, it may be easier to learn in a course setting because someone else is setting up our time, expectations, the check-in points, all of that. But this won't serve you the most in the long run because you will be dependent on others. Remember the bus driver from our self-directed learning from last year? We go where the bus driver wants us to go. We leave when he wants us to leave. We take the route he wants. We arrive when he plans us to arrive. Our learning is dependent on that bus driver. We also need to recognize that there is high value in learning through experience. Even though we tend to think that we learn the most during training, that's not actually true. Let's look at the 70-20-10 rule. According to the 70-20-10 rule, you need to have 3 types of experience to learn and grow as a leader, and I would argue to learn and grow in any situation, following a ratio of 70% challenging experiences and assignments, 20% developmental relationships with people who will help you learn and reflect, and only 10% on coursework and training. This is the ratio, that mix, that is going to give you the most valuable learning, and it is highly dependent on these challenging experiences and assignments. So we need to experience. We need to have these challenging experiences and assignments that the 70-20-10 rule tells us about. And we also need to prepare for them and to reflect on them before we do them again, differently, better, in this intentional iteration. That means that effectively learning on the job is creating again and again what I'm going to call an experience sandwich. Before we get into the experience sandwich, let me talk about 2 things that are likely on your mind right now: the time to do this and the skills to target. So you may be saying, sure, that's nice, but I don't have the time to learn these days. And that's a valid point, which is why learning as part of the work you're already doing is crucial. Learning while you're also getting done the stuff that you need to get done. It will require less time in the moment than, say, taking a course on the side, and it will help you to do your work better and more efficiently. With fewer errors, a more organized approach, better troubleshooting, all of this happens when you learn by experiencing and with the experience sandwich. Of course, you'll have moments of slowdown when you learn to be more efficient with that task as you incorporate feedback, and you may even need to redo something or eventually give a task to someone else to redo it or to finish it. But incorporating feedback, improvising, sometimes redoing or handing off a task, that all should be happening simply as the way in which we're working anyways. Of course, in order to learn on the job, we assume that your IDEP is targeting skills for improvement based on the tasks that you can reasonably expect to face in your role, or at least within your team. So sure, there may be a stretch task or a skill on your list that has little or no overlap with the work that you need to get done, but that should be the exception to the rule. Learning these things that are mostly out of the realm of your role and your tasks, these should be seen as the dessert outside of your meal. You're eager to learn these things. They're new and exciting. They're delicious, but they're not going to give you the substance that you need to continue, that you need to do your work in the moment. So they should probably be sparse, extra, and remember that this dessert learning will take time that cannot be integrated into your work or your workday. It will likely happen through courses, tutorials, extracurriculars, coaching, shadowing, things like that, which may run in parallel with your work, but probably don't intersect with the tasks you need to get done. Remember too the learning pathways. These pathways highlight skills that will particularly benefit from TU's support this year, both in terms of resources and punctual learning opportunities that the TU team provides, and also in terms of being aligned with the crucial tasks for this year's phases. The learning pathways are like the meals that the TU team has started to prepare for you and highly recommends to you. For now, let's assume that your targeted skills are aligned with your tasks, and so you'll need some additional time to learn, but you won't be creating fully separate tasks that aren't anywhere in your team's work plan. This is the ideal situation for learning on the job. In order to be a meaningful learning experience and not just a task you tick off of the list and maybe passively learn a little bit from, the doing, the experience has to be sandwiched. Doing alone won't help you learn fast enough or intentionally enough. As you saw in the scientific method, in Kolb's cycle, and in design thinking, we can think of these as cycles or interrelated steps. But for now, let's think about this learning on the job challenge as a sandwich where the experience is in the middle. First, you need to prepare for the experience, prepare to do that challenging assignment, and then on the other side, you also need to reflect on what you did. But, and this is often overlooked, you need to remember that your learning is not just about you. Nobody truly learns or creates in a vacuum. So you will put up the sides of the sandwich, but you'll also need to ask others, members of your learning support team, to help you with this sandwich. You'll need to intentionally bring them into your learning. So not only do we have this preparation and this reflection, we also want to think about me and them. We can now talk about an experience sandwich matrix. Let's go through the 4 quadrants of the experience sandwich matrix together. So, what do you, the learner, need to prepare for your experience? First and most importantly, you need to identify or craft or create safe to fail opportunities for this experience. A safe to fail opportunity is something that is not the critical centerpiece to something that has to get done, or at the very least we could benefit if it gets done, but it being late or wrong or both won't make everything else crumble. It's this type of experience that would ideally also have a timeline that would give you time to redo it if you need to. It would ideally be something that is supported by others so that those you're working with can check in with you, are keeping an eye on your work and giving you feedback as a natural part of the process of getting this task done. For example, you'll probably never be asked to design an entire training agenda alone. I do trainings for a living, and I've never designed a full training on my own. I always prepare it with a team of people. So maybe if you've targeted a training agenda development as a key skill for you, you'll still be working with the team that does this, but maybe you're asking to take the lead this time. Why is it important that the opportunity be safe to fail? Well, applying a skill that you're still learning has risks associated, and it's often not worth taking huge risks when it's not necessary. That can endanger the work of your entire team, and it can make everyone more reticent about learning on the job. Think of professions like pilot and surgeon. They do a lot of work in safe to fail situations, and then with other team members seconding their work for a long time before they take the lead. If a surgery student were to practice on a real person in a critical situation on their first day, it could have really bad results for everyone right away and make them afraid to work with these learners in the future. We're not surgeons at PMA, but there are critical tasks that are not safe to fail opportunities. So we should avoid using these to learn. We should learn around these first. Why do you need to identify or create or craft these in the first place? Won't they just happen naturally? Okay, maybe eventually they just happen naturally, and maybe they wouldn't. Either way, you don't want to just wait around for the perfect experience or learning application opportunity to appear. Make it happen. Be more intentional about identifying or crafting this as a way to speed up your learning and your contribution to your team, and to possibly have more fitting opportunities for your learning, experiences that specifically target what you want to learn and how you learn best, and when you'll have the most space and support to learn this through the experience. How do you identify or craft or create these experiences? I think it's a mix of awareness and planning. Review the overall planning for your team. Think through the tasks that are coming up. Which ones match with the skills you've targeted to learn? Which of those are safe to fail? Which don't match perfectly, but you might be able to tweak them a little to be a better match. How do you take these tasks on yourself? But you don't just need to review your planning and think through tasks. You need to ask others as well. This moves us to the other part of the preparation side, where you need to prepare with them. In short, you need to make sure that others know your learning goals, that your learning support team, those you work with and for and around, your colleagues and collaborators, your PI, your supervisor, your office mate, that all of them know the skills that you're trying to build on this quarter or semester or year. Why do they need to know? Well, if they know the skills you're targeting, they can look out for application opportunities for these experiences that you might not know about, or ones that might not be assigned to you by default. Of course, you'll still need to remind them regularly of your goals and of your request to help find these challenging experiences for you. How would you go about this? First, you could share your IDEP with your team. We are not sharing it with everyone for you right now, but it's your plan and your learning, so we fully encourage you to send it along to your colleagues, to your supervisors, to your PIs, to let them know what you're hoping to work on. Plus, remember that you're already drafting how these members of your learning support team might be involved in your learning as you write out your IDEP. There are columns about what is the role of the PI supervisor in your learning, what is the role of the TU country lead or of other learning support team members in your learning. That is in your IDEP. You can build it out with and for your learning support team. Consider too, sharing your goal of the day, of the week, of the month during your team check-ins or meetings or planning sessions. You might say, as you know, I'm working on my stated data cleaning skills this month. So if anyone has a data cleaning task they'd like me to do, or data cleaning work they've done that maybe I could review, please let me know. You'll also sometimes have to be proactive. When you see or hear about an opportunity to apply your learning and improve your targeted skills, speak up. You might say, hey, I hear that you're planning the refresher training for REs, and I want to get better at preparing training materials. What if I created this new tool for that training based on what we saw REs having a hard time understanding the last time? And maybe you could review it before we use it and even give me some feedback afterward about what worked and how I might improve on it. You are bringing them into opportunities for you to get these experiences for your targeted skills. Of course, Remember too that you are not only a learner, you're also a member of other learners' learning support teams. So feel free to be proactive when you are the them in those learners' sandwiches. Ask other learners about their learning goals so that you can look out for opportunities for them too. Before we go to the other side of the sandwich, let's pause for a second and go back to this them, your learning support team. Some of us have thought through who this team is for us, and some of us may have felt like we're learning on our own, independent of others, and that's a lonely place and limiting place to be. Your learning support team is composed of people you work with and for, whether they have technical knowledge you can draw on or not. Members of your learning support team are people who might be well positioned to give you experiences, to observe your work, to provide feedback, any or all of this. And we'll talk more about the observations and the feedback shortly when we get to the other side of the sandwich. Pause this video and go to Slack. In the channel for today, take a minute to list the people you think are part of your learning support team and tag them if they're on Slack. Then think about the last thing that one of these people did to support your learning. Describe that in a sentence or two on Slack and tag and thank that person for helping you in your learning in this way. All of the members of your learning support team are crucial to your learning success. So remember to both involve them and be grateful for their support. Now that you've prepared the doing, the experience, both yourself and with the help of your learning support team, you'll actually do the task. You'll have the experience. This is that central part of the sandwich that really only has the most meaning when it has both sides around it.